incense burning, all space is filled with the fragrance. All Buddhas smell it from afar. Auspicious clouds gather everywhere. With utmost sincerity, all Buddhas appear. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage, we offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas.
Good morning, everyone. Good early afternoon. Yeah. Reba, it sounds like you have a singing voice. It sounded wonderful. In Tsongkhapa's 11 reversals, he states, the indication of having trained in the practice of bodhicitta is the reversal of our self-cherishing mind. And I encounter that each day in my Dharma practice. It's one of the things I review as part of my Dharma practice. And lately, when I've been encountering that line, it has made me think, what am I doing with bodhicitta? Where am I at with bodhicitta, right? Over the years, I've spent, months and up to a year of, really putting the practices outlined in the Dharma of Cultivation into practice. And, over time, we move on, we add other things, we do other things, and, kind of shifted away from it. But it's been feeling like time to get back to bodhicitta. What's happening with bodhicitta? Did I get it all? Did I completely internalize it all before? Or could we use maybe a little refresh? So, as usual, if I'm asked to give a talk, you have to go into something I need to go through with me. So thank you ahead of time. So there's a few things to clarify in Tsongkhapa's statement, right? What is bodhicitta in the first place? That's not a one-word answer, turns out. What is the self-cherishing mind? And what does it mean to practice bodhicitta? So we'll start with what is bodhicitta. I mean, from the internet, from Wikipedia, you can get a definition that sounds like the mind, citta means mind, that's aimed at awakening, that's the bodhi mind, with wisdom and compassion. Here's the key, for the benefit of all living beings. So it's not just for us, it's for the benefit of all living beings. Like that comes right in the definition, and that's just off the internet. From the Dharma of Cultivation, and for anybody who may not have a copy, there may be a few copies still back there, I believe, yeah. Mm-hmm. Buddha Master says, according to the Buddha's exposition of the Dharma, so in other words, we didn't make this up recently. This is, the Buddha taught these teachings as part of, subsequent wheels of turning of the Dharma. Mahayana teachings included this teaching about Bodhisattva and Bodhicitta. So Buddha Master says, according to the Buddha's exposition of the Dharma, the true meaning of bodhicitta is that it is the cause that will inevitably lead to becoming a bodhisattva. So it's not just awakening a mind. It's literally, this is what you practice if you're interested in becoming a bodhisattva. I think we all in this room and maybe listening today are on that path. So this should be good news, that there is something specific to practice for us. Makes us feel special. We like when we have something specific to practice for the thing that we're doing, right? He says, with respect to bodhicitta, those that are enlightened, it's not us, right? I don't want to count anybody short, but it may not be us. But he says, those that are enlightened, use their enlightened state of virtue and realization. So all the work that we're doing to cultivate virtue and realization, they've accomplished, right? So they're working now with that. So those who are enlightened use their enlightened state of virtue and realization, correct practices and propagation of the true Dharma to teach and enlighten living beings, so that those living beings will become Buddhas. So, Buddha Master was practicing bodhicitta from that perspective in the life that he spent here with us, right? With respect to bodhicitta, those that are not yet enlightened, that's us, vow out of great compassion that living beings and themselves shall together attain accomplishment in the Dharma and liberation. They help people enter the path of the true Dharma of the Buddha, vowing that they will become bodhisattvas and Buddhas. To such persons, bodhicitta Dharma is the virtue of aiding others to become accomplished in the Dharma. Because they benefit others, they receive merit. They thereby increase the causes leading to their becoming bodhisattvas. So we're getting the sense that there's a special attitude involved with bodhicitta. Like it's an attitude where we ourselves are taking responsibility for the happiness and enlightenment of all beings. Well, that's not just people. All beings. All sentient beings. We'll probably talk a little about insects later. Could come up. So what does it mean to have a self-cherishing mind? So to me it means, above all else, we cherish ourselves and our own well-being first. Like we could all probably say without reservation that that's how we've come along, right? We were trained by society to, make sure you get yours before you, think about, giving too much away. We've got to take care of ourselves. Look out for number one. And then, we start to kind of feel, well, as long as it won't impact negatively on our own interests, we'll consider doing good for others. But ultimately, this is a kind of a state of total separation. It's like there's oneself and there's others. And they're not equal. When this mind experiences pain, it seeks to look for a cause outside itself, blaming others, creating enemies. We don't have to look too hard to see the suffering that this mind causes for both itself and those it encounters. enemies abound. Lama Zopa Rinpoche says in his book Bodhicitta that the source of all problems in the world, is the self-cherishing mind. We've literally isolated ourselves from all of existence, and then we compete with everything we see around us. So the Bodhisattva path and the practice of bodhicitta, specifically, are designed to reverse this terrible state of existence by providing the antidote in the form of practices that can help us emphasize, cherishing others before ourselves. Sounds like the antidote, right? I mean, if we were cherishing ourselves before others, then the antidote would be the opposite. And wanting for their well-being even ahead of our own. Turns out, in my experience, this freedom from self-concern in favor of concern for others is really the ultimate freedom this life has to offer. All the saints and sages have said it. Now we get to practice it. Jim Norse, who's not here today, shares contemplations that he does, and he encounters. He has some, I'll call them allies, teachers. I think he sat up here recently and talked about what he does in his process. Nevertheless, he has these teachers, and one of them is named Yeshua, and he shares his encounters with these teachers with us, and hosts a biweekly call and all of that. But I print the writings and I keep them on my coffee table. And one recently had the following from Yeshua, which goes along with this idea that there's a way to get to. If we look at a mind like, it's easy to see. We've seen movies. A mind like Jesus or the Buddha, can you imagine that there was any self-interest there whatsoever? Think about the way Buddha is depicted, especially in movies, or the series The Chosen, if you're familiar with that. Never taking anything for themselves. You can kind of see this. There's this sense that, so there's this state that we believe the Buddhas and the holy beings have achieved that wants nothing from us but only wants to give to us. And in Buddhism, we're learning that there's a way to actually accomplish this ourselves as a benefit to others. So from Yeshua, he says, the template for living in harmony with each other and with all life is present in all, yet obscured through eons of misguided action. Sound familiar? Within this template are the formulas for thinking, speaking, and acting in balance, in harmony with all existence. Anyone who elects to walk in these ways, to reach for this flow, to remove the obstacles, to persist through difficulty, not only opens up unto his own freedom, but in a natural, non-intrusive, and non-dramatic way, encourages his neighbor to do likewise. Right? And then he says, imagine for a moment that each person is utterly fulfilled, no matter what the external circumstances. That you cannot not be fulfilled. What would then possibly motivate greed, hoarding, accumulating wealth at another's expense, having greater privilege than another? So I just love that quote. It seems to truly encapsulate. I mean, we in this room and whoever's listening to this talk have chosen to walk in this way, to try to remove obstacles and persist through difficulty. On a path that seeks not only to gain our own freedom, but to help others do the same. So what I get from these writings that Jim provides is, first of all, a glimpse. You know, when I read these things, I experience a bodily sense of the state that they're being communicated from. These things are very valuable to me. But also, lost my train of thought. That's gone. So, moving on. There's another quote. This is from the Diamond Sutra. So for me, listening to expounding those teachings, he mentions often, are we okay? He mentions often the Diamond Sutra. And for months I've been writing down Diamond Sutra. Got to look into that. So I finally got around to it. And here's this one in chapter 4 of the Diamond Sutra. The Buddha is speaking to one of his monastics, Subhuti. So Subhuti, in the practice of compassion and charity, a disciple should be detached. That is to say, he should practice compassion and charity without regard to appearances, without regard to form, without regard to sound, smell, taste, touch, or any quality of any kind. Subhuti, this is how the disciple should practice compassion and charity. Why? Because practicing compassion and charity without attachment is the way to reaching the highest perfect wisdom. It's the way to becoming a living Buddha. So the way out of this darkness that we're in, this ignorance that we find ourselves in here in samsara, in this world, in this life, is through practices that are designed to change the habits. Kadara gave a talk a couple of days ago, and she talked about our habits, and be careful about the habits we're cultivating and how we can cultivate new habits. So change our habits of self-cherishing and self-attachment to those of one whose mind learns to truly cherish others before themselves and live in harmony with all beings. So we have some practices specific in Mahayana Buddhism, given here by Buddha Master. I would say, compared to what I've seen in traditional Mahayana texts regarding Bodhicitta, Buddha Master has kind of expanded and I would say kind of oriented and correct, maybe expanded upon the ideas to really get us kind of to where he knows we need to be with this cultivation and its purpose. So thank goodness for that, and I appreciate that from Buddha Master. So the practices leading to freedom from the self-cherishing mind. The overriding feeling or kind of attitude is one of equanimity. This is, we're starting with this. We're trying to foster this. That all beings want to be happy and avoid suffering, just like me. All beings suffer due to ignorance, just like me. And avoiding labeling others as either friend or enemy, not discriminating, categorizing others based on how, kind of they treat us. These are the kind of foundational elements of going into these practices. And then we have the objects of practice, which could be people you like, people you don't like, or people you have no feeling for at all. I used to sit in, when I was actively using these practices that we're going to cover today, both on the pillow as a contemplation, but then carrying them out into the world, sitting at the gym and looking at somebody I don't know on a machine across from me, all kinds of things to see and judge, but I would run through the first set of 7 branches, which we'll get to, as a way of taming my mind, shifting my mind. So people I have no feeling for. I mean, I know the person, don't even know their name, never talk to them. It's always fun with people you don't like. And overall, the trick is to move from effortful, right, where we're using kind of meditation and analysis to get at these themes, to effortless, where it becomes part of us. So I guess my check here that you guys are going through me with is how much of this have I actually internalized? All right. So we're moving from effortful, and in the beginning we have to make effort. That's true of any of these practices, Buddhist principles, incorporating these into our lives, walking them out requires effort, analysis, self-introspection. But ultimately we want these to be spontaneous. We want them to be who we are, to be what we are. So the enlightened beings, this is what they are. Buddha Master says they practice. They have this, and they're continuing to sort of use it, right, as an implementation. So, going into the practices, there are 2 sets, and this is straight out of this book, the Dharma of Cultivation. There are 2 sets of 7-branch Bodhicitta Dharma. So 2 sets of 7 branches. So 14 things altogether, 2 sets of 7. And I just wanted to read this from the Dharma of Cultivation before we get into the specific elements. For Buddha Master, he says, if you introspect every day upon these 2 sets of 7 branches, are not forceful in implementing them, you know how we strive, we're going for it, wait till you see what I'm going to do, all that's not forceful, because we're trying to overcome self here. All this stuff is going to drive straight at overcoming this attachment and this love of this solid, separate individual self that we believe so strongly in, so that we can be free and so others can be free of us. We can be truly free, like Jesus was free, like Buddha was free, like Buddha Master was free. So he says, if you introspect every day upon these 2 sets of 7 branches, are not forceful in implementing them, are greatly compassionate, follow goodness in a natural way. There's an authenticity that he's pointing to there, right? That we don't want to be contrived. We don't want to learn what it looks like and then just be like that. We want these to really be what we have, and that we just naturally are this way. follow goodness in a natural way. And so he says, if you introspect I'm going to stop talking and just read the thing. If you introspect every day upon these 2 sets of 7 branches, are not forceful in implementing them, are greatly compassionate, follow goodness in a natural way, and carry out the 2 sets of 7 branches naturally and according to the Dharma. We've learned through other of Buddha Master's work that he loves naturally. He's constantly stressing naturally. So, carry out the 2 sets of 7 branches naturally and according to the Dharma. That would be true cultivation and complete practice. You will thereby easily be able to attain liberation, become a holy being, and obtain good fortune and wisdom. You will accordingly have realization in the 5 vidyas. Something in it here. There's something in it for us. There's something at stake. You will certainly reach the stage of a bodhisattva. Thus, you should understand that reading words related to practice, understanding the theories of practice, entering the process of cultivation, and incomplete cultivation is easy. So from where we're making effort, we can read the text, we can give it a try, we can go out to the gym. There's no pressure. I'm doing it secretly, right? So whether I do it or not. There's no pressure on me whether I do it right. I'm going to learn as I go, right? So that's easy. To practice the 2 sets of 7 branches perfectly and without attachment is difficult. And that without attachment is the key. It's what's difficult. But he says, actually, when you let go of attachment to self, you immediately enter correct and true cultivation. How could this be difficult? Anyone can do that. So we'll see, and I'll try to highlight how these practices are all designed to get at this self-cherishing mind, to break it down, to have it break up and dissolve. So we can see what we're left with, which we're told is great. And the simplest thing in the world because we already have it. So the first set of 7 branches is called the Dharma of Great Compassion for All Living Beings as My Mother, Bodhicitta. So it gives you a sense for what the focus of these 7 will be. Great compassion for all living beings as my mother. So the first one says, understanding who my mother is. It says, I deeply understand that all living beings in the 6 realms of reincarnation, within the 3 spheres of the universe, have been since beginningless time my fathers and mothers in the revolving cycle of reincarnation. So right away here we can see that we're using our imagination, right? So if I'm in my machine at the gym and I'm looking across and there's that person I don't know, and I'm going to imagine them to be my mother. I'm using my imagination. And possibly some visualization to engage with these practices. Because these attitudes are not natural to us. We don't have them already, so we need to foster them. So we're going to kind of act as if, right? Fake it till you make it kind of thing. We got to start somewhere. Now in my case, that one's kind of easy because I lost my mother at 2. So for me to look out and use this image of my mother sitting across from me in a machine, a person I don't know, but imagining that being my mother evokes a great deal of affection, right? If that was my mother, wow, wouldn't I roll out the red carpet, wouldn't I? Wow, Mom, great to see you. Tell me everything. Wouldn't I take an interest? Wouldn't I be curious and interested in whether or not she was happy, whether or not everything was okay, whether or not there was anything I could do? So you can see how this image of the mother. Now, certainly, people have experiences with mothers in life and fathers that are not the greatest. This is samsara. There's a wide range of experience. Still, we can take, the image of, what our culture and society say a mother should be. We can use that. We can look at how, if we've had pets, we can look at how a mother dog treats a pup, how a mother cat treats a kitten. And we can use that image, right, as a desirable image in these practices. So, but inevitably, as we engage in these practices, again, they're designed scientifically. So the last time I was up here, we were talking about the science of practice. So scientifically, they're designed to go in there and push on and break up and loosen up that attachment to self that we have. So anytime we encounter resistance when we are working with these themes, even just in our own mind, in secret, nothing's at stake, right? So when in our practice we encounter resistance to expressing or even contemplating another as a mother, right? So especially when you're working with somebody you don't like, or that maybe has done damage in the world, damage to others, harmed others, and that kind of thing, right? That really gets at, can we consider this one our equal? Jesus would. Buddha would. This is the mind we're going for. Can we get there? So anytime we encounter resistance, we're running into a limit of our ability to be free of that self-attachment. And we should pay attention to it. There's work to do there. There's work to do right there. So it's an indication we have some work to do. So how would we know, if we didn't have practices like this to help us recognize where the tension comes up, where the resistance forms? And the next one is bearing in mind kindness. So now we understand who our mother is. Now we're saying I should deeply bear in mind that all my parents, all living beings that now exist in the cycle of reincarnation, have since beginningless time given birth to me, reared me, loved me, became tired and ill for me. Their kindness to me is as heavy as a mountain. I should bear in mind their kindness. I will then regard the suffering of my parents as my own suffering. Now I'm looking across at this person in the gym, and I don't know them. I don't know what they've done. I don't know if they've been good to anybody. I don't know any of that. But using my imagination in this way, following this particular theme, I can actually appreciate them from across the hall, across the gym. I can actually sort of develop an appreciation for them without even knowing them through this practice. And it turns out, so I would then regard the sufferings of my parents as my own suffering, recognizing the suffering of others, it turns out, is a key ingredient to making progress in the Dharma. Right? Those Four Noble Truths, the first one was, the truth of suffering. So understanding suffering and understanding how we suffer is where we start. And then that naturally moves out to, the same suffering I find in myself, I see here, I see here, I see here. And then compassion begins to bloom. And that's how the path works. So that recognition of suffering is a key ingredient, but recognizing the kindness of others. Just because we don't know somebody, we don't know if they've been our mother, our father, our brother, our cousin, a husband, a wife, in another lifetime. we don't even know, and we encountered this in our studies in the group the other day, we don't even know if it might be Avalokiteshvara. We don't even know. We have no idea. Anybody that we encounter could be a Buddha, could be a Bodhisattva, taking a form for a particular purpose. We have no idea. So, yeah, they could be ultimately the most kind person. I just don't know them. But I'm not gonna let my judgment of their appearance, of how they seem to act, based upon what I already know about how people act, based upon my knowledge of culture and society and all that. I'm not going to project my own flaws onto them, which is pretty much what we do when we see faults in others. We're just projecting our own flaws. We're going to not do that. We're going to have a kind thought. Now that we've recognized their kindness, we want to repay their kindness. So it says, I understand that my parents, i.e., all living beings, have offered me everything. They're now revolving and wandering in the 6 realms of reincarnation, experiencing endless suffering. I resolve to take action to enlighten myself and others, to save and liberate my parents, all living beings, in order to repay their kindness. So this was fun up till now. This is where the rubber meets the road, right? This is where you meet that attachment to self. You start to meet it. Way beyond our normal thinking, is it not? I resolve to take action to enlighten myself and others right away, as someone who, throughout my career always got nervous about, how am I going to do it? How am I going to do it? So right away that brings to mind, how am I going to do it? How am I going to get it done? Right? Self, 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 self. And then loving kindness. The next one. At all times, to the actions of my 3 karmas, I am loving and kind toward all living beings who have been my parents. I wish them a long life without illness, good fortune, good luck, and a happy life. So this is one of the Brahma Viharas. So what I liked about this early on, when I was exposed to this, having even still been new to Buddhism, was that, in Buddhism we have all the different things. We have all the precepts, and we have, the 4 Brahma Viharas, the 10 precepts, we have the 10, right ways to be, and all these things. And, a little overwhelmed by all that in the beginning, taking a little at a time. I like the fact that some of these overlapped, I thought, with, the Brahma Viharas. So I didn't have to have a separate practice for those. I could actually just use these. I like that. I'm kind of an efficiency sort of guy, I suppose. Now, of course, I've graduated all the way to the point where I have the Brahma Viharas each morning in my practice, right? In addition to these, and so we're all good. We found time for all of it. It didn't really cost us more than a few minutes, as it turned out, but it sounded like a lot in the beginning. Right? Self-concern, self-concern, self-concern. It's where we're coming from. It's what we're dealing with. So loving kindness. Loving kindness. Wish them a long life without illness, good fortune, good luck, a happy life. This can be a little bit of a hurdle to get over if we're working with somebody we don't like or we know has done harm. I mean, if we feel that kind of resistance, and we feel like there's a little bump there, a little speed bump, it might be pointing to an area of self-importance of ours, definitely, which is definitely an artifact of our self-attachment. Whenever you feel those things, even right there sitting, you're doing this on the pillow, you're sitting, you're contemplating this idea, even right there when you experience that hurdle, that resistance, look at it. What is this? What's the cause of this? Why do I feel this way? Is what I think about that person really true? Is that all there is? For some reason, Venerable keeps running into that phrase as well, and the song, "Is that all there is?" keeps coming to our minds. We're of the same sort of, similar, actually, generation, so not surprising. Those songs were on the radio in the kitchen when I was growing up, right? They weren't my songs, but they were on the radio in the kitchen. And then the next one, compassion. Day and night, I constantly beseech all of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to empower all of my parents, all living beings, so that they may extricate themselves from all forms of suffering, encounter and practice the Buddha Dharma, and liberate themselves from the sufferings of cyclic existence. So on the path here, we've learned that the only thing really worthwhile to pursue, we have this whole life that we've lived pursuing all these things, house on the beach, all this stuff. It's really nice. But if we're on this path that we've been at it a while, we kind of realize none of this kind of goes with us. Man, we can't take this with us. So our priorities kind of shift, and we start to want this, liberation, and then, we want that for everybody else too. Why wouldn't we? At least the people we love, right? That's where it always starts. We want that for the people we love. So, but compassion, we truly, because we understand suffering now, we truly do not want anyone to suffer, and we will supplicate the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas on their behalf. So now we're praying for them. Still in the gym. We're on number 5 now. Now I'm praying for this person I don't know. The benefit? Nothing to them. All to me. My heart. My mind is shifting. When I leave the gym, I'll be in a better place because I've done this. They'll be wherever they are. Now, I may look for they seem to be struggling with the machine. I may jump up, take the opportunity to help. There's ways I can interact and bring joy to their day, right? Without taking anything from them. We want to be careful about that striving, right? Because when we get to, we want to be good to everybody, then all of a sudden it's burdened by us wanting to be good to them. And then feeling like they owe us something in return because we put such a heavy emphasis on what we were giving them. So we want to be natural about this stuff. But we do want to find ways to enhance people's day. If we can. Some people just want to be where they're at, and there's nothing to do. So that's fine too. But the good news is we've shifted our mind. So when we leave the gym, all the people we encounter will be better off, definitely be better off by our having done this little practice while we're sitting there when nobody knew what we were doing. We did it in secret. It's not like we were going to be embarrassed by it. All these things that you would otherwise worry about. When we do things in secret like that, it's cool because we don't have to worry about what people think. It's a burden in this world, what people think. So the next one, renouncing greed. Now we're giving all this, but we want to make sure that we have no attachment in our mind to anything that we do to benefit living beings. We cultivate non-attachment to all of our good actions of body, speech, and mind. Thus, our good actions become natural and spontaneous, as my original nature is good. We're trying to uncover our original nature. Our original nature is good. It's already there. We're just trying to sort of get to it through kind of the messiness that's around it, dust that's on the mirror. I do not do good purposefully. I do good and then forget about it. So for me, this became a mantra. For me, I just walked around with this: do good and forget about it, do good and forget about it, do good and forget about it. In the house, making a meal, serving people, Sue's mother over for the weekend, doing for her. Do good and forget about it, do good and forget about it. Constantly releasing that attachment, because that attachment, we're trying to undo our attachment to self and to all of this. And so we definitely don't want to start to create more based upon all the good we're doing. So we want to be in the world, and I kind of like to think of it as leaving no footprint. We're giving and taking nothing. And I guess that's, the meaning of, the state of, I think they call it the three emptinesses: no giver, no receiver, no gift. That state of complete emptiness, that's what we're after. And in the end, you wouldn't say that the Buddha didn't give anything. You wouldn't say that Buddha Master was here, didn't give anything. It's just how we think of these things. So then the last one in the first set of 7 branches, eliminating attachment. In my practice, as I cultivate all forms of goodness and benefit my parents, all living beings, I should not become attached to any Dharma. I should eliminate all attachment to self. Realizing a state of emptiness, I am aware and I experience wonderful happiness that comes from samadhi. While practicing the Dharma, I am not attached to the Dharma. I do not intentionally get rid of deluded thoughts. I do not intentionally seek the truth. Not coming, not going, blissful, clear, and without thought, I am as calm as tranquil water. Everything, including myself, is inherently empty. So he just laid out. So that's what it looks like to do this practice. That's what it looks like at the end of this practice. If there ever is. There's really never an end to this practice. It's just that we become implementers of what we gain from doing the practice. So it's never really over. But it's like here we're kind of, initially when we're making effort, we're trying to introduce the possibility. But ultimately, we want to realize for real the emptiness of self and any notion of what the self can kind of grasp onto and imprison us and others with by taking ownership as a doer. So he really paints the picture there. This is what it looks like when you use these practices to a level of effectiveness where you've gained accomplishment. And there's enough here to get started with. When I'm in the gym, it's the first 7. Now, it turns out that when we get into the next 7, they, aside from the first few, start to kind of go in the direction of what it really looks like to be a bodhisattva. And they're called the Dharma of Bodhisattva Correspondence, Bodhicitta. So what is the give and take in the world of a bodhisattva? Now, the first one is easy to understand. Self and others are equal, bodhicitta. It says, when there's a conflict of interest between myself and others, I will rid myself of hatred, antipathy, greed, and arrogant, disparaging mentality. I will not emphasize benefiting myself. I will treat myself and others equally. Sounds simple enough. But we have this self-cherishing, self-important mind that we're still walking around with. Self-important being a major obstacle to self and others are equal. So some work to do here. So again, pointing to where the problems are with this bodhisattva aspiration. There was a funny thing that came up in our Dharma study the other day. The Buddha Master was talking about coming back as all these different things, insects and worms and snakes and a whole list of things. And the thought leapt into my mind that, well, I was definitely better than coming back as an insect. In other words, I'd done better so far than coming back as an insect. Right? So this is how deep this stuff goes. Do I really believe I could come back as an insect? What would be so bad about that? Do I consider myself equal with all beings? An insect being one of them? Last year I took up the front porch project, which is power wash and paint and just refresh the whole thing. And this year now, this past week or so, I've been engaged in the back porch project. Same sort of thing. And what I encounter is insects that are living in the spaces that I'm trying to clean and prepare for treatment, right? Painting, etc. And so I try to be aware. I'm using a power wash. This thing would put a hole in your hand if you put it close enough, right? So then we see the animals scurry out, the spiders, and scurry out from where they are, and I'll back off, and they can't stay there because they're ultimately going to be harmed, right? So I'll back off, and the power washer has this big plume, and at the end it's really just kind of swirling water, and it's not too bad, but it's enough to sort of get that thing off of where it is, and then he can go and live a fruitful life, elsewhere. I just don't want him here because he's going to get hurt. But it's amazing to see the insects and how there was one area where there was this big spider, a big spider, Venerable wouldn't like it, big spider. So you could see him operate, and he had this big nest. Man, he had it made in the shade. Things are flying into that nest. He's, right? What a great life. I mean, really, not a bad gig. So I had to disrupt all that. And then he scrambled onto, the gutter or whatever. And so I took the nozzle, without having it on, I took the nozzle and I got him on the nozzle. And then, kind of whipped them off into the yard. And if you know anything about spiders, they spin webs, like instantly, in a minute, like Spider-Man. So you familiar with fly fishing? Anybody do fly fishing? So now I'm trying to hurl this, just get him off the end of the thing, and he spins a web and puts himself gently on the ground over there, floating on his web that he just, little lead that he spun from my thing. I felt like a fly fisherman. There he went, and there he goes. So he's safe, but I'm like, man, these insects are like, every one of them is a master of their domain. Like they should automatically get a promotion to the next level. Like they're just ultimately the best at, what they're designed to be. And again, one of them could actually be Avalokitesvara. because we were reading how Avalokiteshvara will take a form to benefit or to save a living being in the form of that being, or in a form that allows them to execute by skillful means whatever they need to do. So it could be an animal, it could be an insect, could be. So we owe it to ourselves to, consider ourselves equal with all beings, because we really don't know who they are, what they are. I love the image also of, the person that's sweeping in the courtyard at the castle. Nobody's paying attention. Everybody wants to come in and get wisdom. They have an oracle up there and whatever. They go, I'll talk to them. And meanwhile, the guy that got it all, the guru, if you will, is the one sweeping the courtyard, getting pushed aside, happy to just sort of move aside and do what he's doing, and doesn't need to tell anybody anything, right? So you never know who you're actually dealing with. So when you're in the gym and you're looking at that person over there, why not want the best for them? Why not give them loving kindness? So, these, so I was just marveling, the insects in the master said to me, are we really that great at being humans? Are we as good at being humans as any insect as at being an insect? I would say no. Now, especially given our potential of, so much greater, awareness and capacity. Nevertheless, the range of kind of, because of that, the range of possibilities for humans, is wide. But nevertheless, not sure what we have to be so proud of over and above other living beings on the planet that share the planet with us, given that we're not, generally speaking, so being humans. And we can see that playing out all around us. And we've seen it play out in our own lives, most likely. So to have a little bit of fun, by the way, if we're worried about reincarnating as an insect, we worry about things. We worry about things, right? Because we're self-attached. And we've learned to achieve a certain amount of comfort in our life. We've built careers. We did all this to have a certain amount of comfort in our life, and we want to maintain that. So we're worried. We say, well, we're going to come back this way. We're going to come back as this. We're even worried about that Bodhisattva vow that says we'll stay and hold off complete liberation until we have a chance to save all living beings. Well, geez. I get tired of that. Then what? Like, what's the next thing? You know what I mean? Like, in my career, I was on a job for 5 or 6 years. And then I would be like, what's next? Been there, done this. Now, what's next, right? Boredom sets in. But this is the mind that we have. So when we look at these things, but if we're worried about reincarnating as an insect, fear not. Their lives are really short, and we won't know any different. Just like we don't know any different in our lives right now. We don't know any different than being a human. Someone who's in, the bush of the Amazon doesn't realize that, to us, they're in the bush in Amazon. That's where they are. They don't know any different. So then in a short while, we're going to come back, off the roulette wheel for some other existence. And if we're human again, we won't know that we were human now. So we worry in this life. We worry all the time. What am I going to come back as? I don't want to come back as that. We're not going to know the difference. What should concern us is being in the cycle of birth and death. That's what should concern us. And that's what liberation is for. That's what liberation seeks to take us out of. So we want to worry about something That's what we can worry about. Worry about being subject to the cycle of birth and death. And in the Dharma of Cultivation, he lists 8 right views that we should sort of prioritize in a certain order. And renunciation is pretty high on that list. And that is renunciation determined to leave the cycle of birth and death. That's what this path is for. That's what we're doing. If you didn't think that's what we were doing, surprise. So, the next, so we have self and others are equal. Exchange between self and others. It says, I want to bear the sufferings of all living beings. I give to others all of my happiness and good luck so that they may leave suffering to obtain happiness. I remember when I first encountered this, I was like, wait, you mean if like we're in a fire? So I go right to the worst thing, right? You know, this is right to the worst thing. You mean if we're in a fire? That I want to actually be in the fire, not them? Like I'm going to step into the fire? You know, all these scenarios, this is all your self-attachment, churning up all the possibilities and the things to worry about. But if we truly understand suffering, and we understand that everyone around us is suffering, and we want to alleviate our own suffering, and then naturally we come to want to alleviate everybody else's suffering, then this is kind of not a stretch. We just may not understand the mechanism by how to do it. And there are some technical practices for this. Traditionally, something called Tonglen, which some of you may have some experience with. There are some practices in the Supreme and Unsurpassable Mahamudra of Liberation that kind of go in this direction as well. It's interesting to note from that book on Bodhicitta that I read by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, which I found very helpful, kind of filled in a lot of the blanks around what is bodhicitta and kind of the mind that you're trying to develop. He said that this second set of teachings, and certainly Buddha masters, aside from the first few, vary from the tradition, at least as I saw in that book. But that this second set of 7 branches was kept secret in the tradition. So the first 7 were practiced by anyone, and the second set were kept secret until such time as it was deemed by someone, some master, that, hey, he didn't want them to be lost, so he began to teach them, to large audiences and things like that. But yeah, there's some complexity here. It's again, as Venerable says, I guess you don't give a baby, roast beef at 6 months old, right? Their system can't handle it, so we go with what we can handle. And then benefit others before self is the third one. When other living beings and I are suffering, I want others to extricate themselves from suffering before I do. When other living beings and I are happy, I want others to be happier than I am. Simply putting the needs of others before our own. And I used to, well, I still do, we develop these ways of implementing these practices, and they don't really leave you. Do good and forget about it. It still circulates in my mind anytime I feel like I've done something for somebody. And then no needs is the way I would deal with both self and others are equal. So looking at my mother-in-law, who's elderly now, she just turned 93, I believe. Self and others are equal. She's got a set of suffering that she talks a lot about. But that's suffering. I have my own suffering. We're both suffering. We both want to be happy, right? So that's an equalizing factor. And then when I would be in the sort of, coming out, maybe I took a shower or something like that, coming out in the morning or got dressed and coming out of the room, going in, and I know that there's going to be, she needs the TV on, there's all these things, I would remind myself, no needs. No needs here. No needs here. Benefit others before self. No needs here. I'm good. Now I'll go out, and whatever the need is out here, I'm free to entertain it. Without that reminder, I might not be. I might be like, oh shit, I'm trying to get out the door. What? Some complicated thing. So no needs is kind of the way I worked out. So for me, the first 7 branches, and then self and others are equal, and then benefit others before self, are what I took out into the world, and when I did my sitting contemplation, what I used primarily. Because I understood them and I could work with them. The next, dedicating merit. I dedicate to all living beings all of the merit and accomplishments from my cultivation in the hope that they will leave suffering and attain liberation. So if we thought we were doing this for ourselves, correction, we don't even want the fruit that comes from doing good. We hear so much in our sort of religious upbringing about do good, it comes back to you. And we get caught up with that. Now it's a whole world of people doing good so that they can kind of, get what's coming. No, we give that away. In Buddhists, we give that away. We don't want that, because that's going to feed this self-cherishing nature that we're trying to break up. Fearlessly protect the Dharma. So now we're becoming bodhisattvas, guys. Now we're growing up, right? We were in kindergarten, first 7. Now we're growing up. We're becoming bodhisattvas now. We have to kind of see ourselves that way. Fearlessly protect the Dharma. When any evil spirits or demons harm the Buddha Dharma, lead living beings to break the precepts, or harm living beings, resulting in the suffering of living beings, I will maintain right view. I will not fear the evil powers of those demons. And I will step forward to protect the Buddha Dharma and the wisdom whereby living beings will become liberated. Now, he took that way out to, you're a bodhisattva, you don't even have a body anymore, and this is the work you're doing. I get it. We got to sort of, bring this down to our level, but certainly we can hear falsehoods around us, and naturally, without anybody sort of realizing anything ideally, we can offer a correction. We can give a perspective that sort of maybe changes that view or just offers something else, right? So we know the Dharma. The Dharma is all of life. So we can hear someone speaking incorrectly or charging someone or blaming someone for something, and maybe we can offer something that takes them back onto the middle road. Help them suffer less, maybe help them do less suffering, outside of that. We can fiercely protect the Dharma. Effectively lead others to correct practice. Same idea. Because living beings are burdened with the power of karma that's accumulated since beginningless time, because they're ignorant and have created all kinds of negative karma, there will be times when they will not repent or change their ways, despite my constructive exhortations. In such case, I will use powerful rectifying Dharma methods to lead such people onto the path of true Dharma and beneficial and good conduct. I'm not sure I have that many powerful rectifying Dharma methods, but, you can, but so again, we're growing up here, though. We're actually becoming this now. and we're going in that direction. So we're planting these seeds, and we're saying, yes, I want to be able to do this. Yes, I'm signing up. Sign me up. Whatever it takes to go through this apprenticeship, I'm there, planting the seeds. And then renouncing myself to help others build good karma, bodhicitta. I'm noticing how each of these says bodhicitta. These are all aspects of bodhicitta. So when we ask, what is bodhicitta, we wanted a one-word definition. Here's what we got so far. We're 75 minutes in. And we're not finished. I had to do a calculation, 60 plus 15, 75. Hans, what's that thing you do? So, yeah, powerful Dharma rectifying methods. So that, Avalokiteshvara coming through as an animal to reach someone and to sort of maybe teach them something or somehow, these are powerful rectifying Dharma methods, right? That are possible in the realm of sort of existence. It's just that we may not have them yet. But that's what we're going for. We're signing up for this. Yeah, I loved hearing in the same area of expounding that talks about expounding the absolute truth of the Hat Sutra, that where Buddha Master talks about Avalokiteshvara. He mentions how Avalokiteshvara goes into the hell realms to overcome the demons for the purpose of saving them. For the purpose of saving them. So so you see, effectively lead others to correct practice. Use powerful rectifying Dharma methods, right? So going in to overcome a demon, because that's what they need. They need to be overcome, then let's start fresh. It can't be dealt with on the level of, right? They need to be overcome, and then we can work with them the same. But that all the actions that we take, and we may need to confront people from time to time in this world. That's the world we're in. But as a bodhisattva, we never have the idea that we want to completely destroy anybody. We would prefer they saw the light and came to know about ignorance like we do, and the benefit of knowing that, and come to know about suffering and the benefit of knowing that, and came to encounter a path like we have to get out of that. That's how a bodhicitta thinks about people that do harm. And then we have, finally, renouncing myself to help others build good karma, bodhicitta. Says when the realization of other people is higher than mine, or their ability to save living beings is better than mine, I will yield to other people so that living beings will be benefited more. At such time, without any hesitation, I yield to them. This furthers the great undertaking of goodness. It also gets at this idea that we love to know. We love to be the ones that know. Hey, I know. So we sit in our Dharma study a couple times a week, and it's an opportunity to talk about the Dharma with a group of our peers. But we have to be very careful, and Soma's good about sort of, admonishing us. We have to be very careful to give space and really internalize what someone else has said before we jump in with what we know. So yielding to others. So everyone is a teacher in that environment. We're all equal. Need to be a star. Isn't that a song too? I can hear it. It's one of those women soul singers.
Everybody's a star.
No.
I don't need to be a
Star, baby. What is it? So anyways, I hope this was helpful. It has been helpful for me to get back to this. And now that I realize it only takes a few minutes to go through these, there's an effort. There's always an effort, right? So when I first, took up this work a few years back, the effort was to memorize the 7 branches and have enough of a sense of what they intended in my own mind to be able to use them without having the book open. So for a while I would use it before my sitting meditation. So it would be a work up into my sitting meditation, like a contemplation, and that would lead into a sitting meditation. And lost my train of thought again.
Let's talk about how you used it and it doesn't take that long.
Oh, right. Right, okay, well, we have to make an effort to memorize. Yeah, thank you. We have to make an effort to memorize. Even in the practices, other practices now that I have, even the Brahma Viharas. It's helpful to be able to just reel those off in your mind without having to sort of consult the text from which you learned them originally. So we make an effort to use these. In the beginning, it would be the book is open, and I'm looking at each one, and then I'm trying to go through. But it's cumbersome. If I'm trying to have an object, a person that I'm using as an object of the first 7 branches, and I have to keep looking at the books, it's a very interrupted sort of contemplation. So to make it better, if I can memorize and get the essence of it, the 7 steps, then I can have an easier time and have a better time, and the practice itself will be better because I'm not so encumbered with the physicality of the whole thing. But that's one of the ways that I incorporated it. When we had the retreat that led to our exposure to this the first time, it was the first I was hearing of it. First I heard of the Bodhisattva path, was a little shocked that I was being asked possibly when I was signing up to forego liberation for the purpose of saving others. So the reason I mention that all the time is because that was my first thought was, wait, suppose I don't want to do that. I'll take the liberation without all that, which looks like, the price I have to pay. Since then, luckily, I've realized that, we just don't understand the mind that we're working towards that won't be encumbered by all these selfish sort of, suppose I don't want to. That's the way we are now. Thank goodness we won't have that mind later on. Suppose I don't want to be an insect. So we're not going to know the difference. We're not even going to know. So, but ultimately, hopefully, what I tried to convey was that this cultivation of bodhicitta is, and Buddhist cultivation, and this path that we're on, it's no joke. It's not like something fun we do. It's good to go to a meeting once a week. We meditate like that, and chanting. No, its aim is to completely obliterate any sense of a self or attachment to a self. That means no more Joe. Good news for some. But that means no more Joe. And, I mentioned how doing pretty good 6 years into this, sitting there in Dharma study the other day, topic of coming back as like, a worm or a snake or something, an insect. I think I've gone beyond that. I don't think I'll come back like that. Who am I to say, right? What do I know? But this is the mind that I have. So that thought, makes perfect sense with the mind that I have. But I chuckled and mentioned it to everybody. Go ahead. Is someone trying to speak? Sorry. Somebody might not be muted. Yeah. So again, by the time we have the mind of Bodhi, we're not going to be worried about hanging around to save living beings. We'll have lost the self-cherishing mind that brings that thought up in the first place. It's impossible for us to see that from where we are, though. So we're concerned for our safety, for being bored. Resistance comes up. Do I want to do this? What else is there to do? What was mentioned the other day as well, the value of this precious life. In order to do this cultivation, in order to do this work, we need this human life is really, we need other living beings to practice with and on. And it so happens that we have a choice to do so. We have an extra level of conscious awareness that all the other sort of living beings around us that we can see don't have. So a spider doesn't really have much of a choice. This is a range of behavior. He can be selfish. He's still self-attached. It's still him and others, right? So he's still self-attached. He's in samsara. He can generate karma by his actions still. But the range of what he can do is limited. He can only do so bad, but he can only do so good. Good news is his life is very short. But we have a choice. In this existence, we can do really, really good, and we can do really, really bad. And here, we have a choice to do so, it seems, based on good fortune, favorable karma, and the availability of true Buddha Dharma to work with, to make progress, to getting out of the cycle of birth and death. This idea that we want that for ourselves, I probably mentioned from time to time St. Teresa at the end of her chronicle, her writing on the 7 mansions. She reaches the 7th mansion and she realizes there's nothing to do now but help others. Nothing to do now but help others. It's a state of mind. Nothing to worry about. But from where we are now, we have to practice. And Bodhicitta is designed to get at all those places where we're hanging on for what we think is dear life. This short, dear life. So ultimately, as with all things where we're trying to change our minds, the importance of daily practice cannot be overemphasized. Due to our conditioning and deep-seated ignorance, we need to expose ourselves daily to Dharma, and if possible, multiple times a day, to reverse the curse of this self-cherishing mind that we have today. I think most of us that are here and are listening understand the issue. We understand the problem. So we have a desire to sort of work this through. And we have tools to do it. So I encourage us all to make good use of the tools that we have and practice daily the best we can. I thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Joe.
Would someone like to dedicate Barrett? I'll do it. We dedicate the merit of our time here today discussing the Dharma to all living beings who've been our mother, throughout samsara, throughout all realms, throughout all spheres. That they come to know the nature of their suffering. They come to understand it. They come to understand that there's a path out of it. That they encounter teachers and Dharma teachings that can help them to move out of their suffering and ultimately out of the cycle of birth and death altogether. May all be well and happy. Thank you again.